The cot in the back room had been slept in. There was a cup of coffee next to it. Steam was still rising off it. I keep coming back to that image. Everything before it felt fine, everything after it didn't. My name is Derek. I do urban exploration, have for about 6 years. Not the kind where you post videos and pretend to be brave. The quiet kind. Research first, in and out clean, leave nothing, take only photos. I had a reputation in the small circles where that matters. This was early November in central Pennsylvania. A cold front had pushed down from the north 2 days before. The fields along Route 322 were gray and bare. The temperature had dropped into the high 20s overnight and hadn't climbed much past 40 by the time I made the drive out. I remember the heater in my truck running the whole way and still feeling cold. I thought it was just the season. I was heading to Millhaven General, a mid-century hospital shuttered since 2003. Asbestos in the walls, mold in the lower floors, a lawsuit over the water table that had been grinding through courts for nearly a decade. Nobody in it, nobody maintaining it. The county wanted it gone but didn't have the budget to knock it down yet. I had done my homework, satellite maps, newspaper archives. One visit 3 weeks earlier where I'd walked the perimeter and found a ground floor window on the east side with a broken latch. I drove out in my 2009 Ford Ranger, parked, waited to make sure no one was watching. Then I went in. The main entrance hall was what you'd expect, tile floors under 2 decades of grit, ceiling panels dropped in some places, hanging in others. The nurse's station had been stripped of anything useful, wires dangling from the desk. The smell was mold and old plaster and something underneath, a faint chemical sweetness, like cleaning fluid that had dried out and gone strange over 20 years. I noticed it every time I moved into a new section of the building. It was quiet in the way that large empty structures are quiet, which is not actually silence. The low tick of the building contracting in the cold. A hum from somewhere below, HVAC housing still mounted to the roof, probably vibrating in the wind. The occasional creak from above that sounded for a moment like a footstep and then didn't repeat. Normal. I'd been in enough places like this to know the difference between a building talking to itself and something else. I moved slowly, I always do. Headlamp on, secondary flashlight in my coat pocket, respirator around my neck but not yet needed. The plan was the upper floors, the administrative wing on 3, which had a preserved waiting room with original 1958 furniture still under plastic sheeting. I got to the stairwell and started up. The second floor was the children's ward. I didn't linger, it's not superstition, those rooms just don't feel good. Empty cribs, cartoon animals painted on the walls, faded to something wrong looking. A smell on that floor that was different from the rest of the building, something organic and close, like wet wood, warmer than the floor below, which made no sense. The windows up here were intact, the ones below were not. I noticed that and kept moving. That's when I saw the door. At the end of the second floor corridor, there was a set of double doors leading to what the blueprints labeled as the extended care wing. Those doors were supposed to be chained. I had seen the chain 3 weeks earlier on my perimeter walk, a heavy padlock, painted orange by the county, with a serial number stenciled on the shackle in white. I had noted it specifically because the chain looked newer than the building, like someone had replaced it recently. The chain was on the floor, coiled neatly. The padlock was open and sitting on top of it, like someone had placed it there carefully. I stood in the hallway, thought about it, told myself a maintenance crew might have been through, told myself the chain was old and might have given. I almost turned around, almost. I pushed through the doors. The extended care wing was narrower than the main ward, 12 rooms on each side, ceilings lower, windows boarded from the outside so my headlamp was the only light. The air was different in here, stiller, heavier. A smell I couldn't immediately place, something like wood smoke, faint enough that I second-guessed it, something like cooked food underneath or the ghost of it. The floor had more dust than the rest of the building, thick and undisturbed, except for one thing. Footprints. Coming from the far end of the corridor toward me, one set, adult-sized, heading in my direction and then stopping about 15 feet away. That was it, like whoever made them had just stopped existing. I looked behind me, my own prints were there, fresh, leading back to the double doors. The other set didn't match mine. Different shoe, flat, smooth sole, no tread I could make out clearly. Longer stride than mine, and I'm not short. I kept walking, I don't know why. Curiosity does strange things when you've been doing this long enough. The rooms I passed were standard, stripped beds, broken IV stands, a few scattered papers. Then I reached room 214. The door was open about 6 inches. I pushed it with my shoulder. The cot was in the back corner, army style, with a blanket folded at one end. Next to it, on an overturned plastic crate, was a camping mug. I stepped closer and held my hand over it. Warm, not hours old, minutes. I stood still and breathed through my nose. The wood smoke smell was stronger in here, and now I could place the other note underneath it. Instant coffee. the kind that smells slightly burnt no matter how you make it. There was a small battery lantern on the floor beside the crate, switched off. A paperback book face down, spine broken, pages swollen from the damp. A pair of heavy lace-up boots by the door, dark with wear, lined up neatly against the baseboard. I stepped back into the hallway and listened. Nothing. I turned my headlamp off. Some explorers do this. You kill your light and let your eyes adjust. Sometimes you catch something you couldn't see before, an exit light on a battery backup, a crack of outside light. I stood there for about 30 seconds in full black. The darkness in that wing was total. No gaps in the boarding, no ambient light from anywhere. Just my own breathing and the distant tick of the building's frame. And then the smell shifted. Not dramatically, just a degree of warmth in the air that I hadn't noticed before. The way you realize a room has changed temperature only after it already has. Someone had been in that corridor recently enough that the air still held a trace of it. Then I saw it. At the far end of the corridor, past the double doors I had come through, there was a faint bounce of light, not steady, moving, like someone walking with a flashlight, shining it along the floor. It lasted maybe 4 seconds, then it was gone. I turned my headlamp back on and walked toward the double doors, steady pace, no running. I pushed through and looked down the main corridor of the second floor. Empty. I stood there and counted to 5, then I heard it, a sound from below me, not a creak, not the building settling, footsteps, deliberate, crossing a room on the first floor. 2, 3, 4 steps, then stopping, the measured pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going and wasn't in a hurry. I went cold. I moved to the stairwell, took the stairs down one at a time, trying not to make noise. At the bottom I stopped and listened. The footsteps had stopped. I looked toward the main hall. Nothing moved. I looked toward the east side, toward the window I'd come in through. The window was open, same as I'd left it. I crossed the main hall without stopping and went out through the window, dropped to the gravel outside. The cold air hit me hard after the closed warmth of the building. I stood there for a second just breathing it in. Then I walked to my Ranger, got in, locked the doors, and sat. I didn't call anyone, there was no one to call. I'm not a security guard. I'm just a guy who goes into buildings that other people ignore. I wasn't supposed to be there. I drove to the sheets on the edge of Millhaven and sat in the parking lot with a coffee I didn't drink, tried to work out what made sense. Someone was living there, that was the only answer. The cot, the coffee, the boots lined up by the door, the single set of footprints going nowhere. Someone had been in that room within the last half hour of me finding it. Which meant they heard me come in, and they moved while I was still inside. I went back to the satellite maps that night. The hospital had 4 stairwells. If someone knew that building better than I did, and they obviously did, they could shadow a person through the entire layout without ever being seen. Stay 1 floor below, move through parallel halls, cut through maintenance corridors. I had been in there for maybe 40 minutes, long enough for someone patient to track every step I took. I reported it anonymously through the county's non-emergency line. Said I'd seen light in the windows of the old hospital from the road. Thought someone might be squatting. They sent a car out the next morning. I followed up on the call a few days later. The officer I spoke with said they found evidence of long-term occupation. Not just the room I'd found, multiple rooms, food supplies, clothing, a camp stove. She said it looked like someone had been living there for years, possibly. They didn't find anyone. No arrest, no identification. Just empty rooms with signs of habitation and a building that knew how to keep a secret. Millhaven General came down 8 months later. The demolition crew found more evidence of squatting on the sub-basement level, rooms down there that weren't on any blueprint I'd ever found. The local paper ran a short piece about it, 2 paragraphs, that was it. I still go into buildings, that part of me didn't change. But I check doors twice now. I kill my light when I enter and I wait. And if something was supposed to be locked and isn't, I turn around. Whatever was in that building with me moved through it like they lived there, because they did. And they knew I was coming long before I found that cup. By the 3rd Tuesday, I knew it wasn't a girlfriend. My name is Kevin. I've been a licensed private investigator in Texas for 11 years. Class A license out of San Antonio. Before that, 12 years with Big Sur County Sheriff. I work solo now, home office off Culebra Road, a 2019 Chevy Silverado with window tint and enough camera equipment to make the job look easy to people who have never done it. The client called herself Donna Marsh. She paid a $1,200 retainer in cash. I should have thought harder about that. She was maybe 50, well-dressed, calm in the way people are calm when they've already decided something. She said her husband, Ray, had started leaving the house every Tuesday evening around 7, home by 10 or 11, wouldn't say where he'd been. She wanted documentation. She thought it was another woman. Standard infidelity tale. I take 3 or 4 of those a year. Mostly they are what they look like. I pulled Ray's vehicle registration through the usual channels. Gray Ford F-150, 2017, mid-50s, reading glasses on a lanyard. He looked like he sold insurance or managed a Home Depot. Unremarkable. I confirmed his address in a subdivision off Loop 1604 and noted his plate. First Tuesday, I picked him up when he backed out of the driveway at 7:08. He drove south on 1604, got on 410, exited at Military Drive. I stayed 3 cars back. He pulled into a Whataburger lot, sat in his truck for about 6 minutes, then drove on. He ended up parking behind a strip mall off Pleasanton Road, sat in the truck again. Then a second car pulled up, a white Camry, plates at a bad angle, and Ray got in. He was back in his own truck by 9:40, home before 10. I wrote it up as an unknown second vehicle, possible romantic contact. I told Donna I needed another week. Second Tuesday, same route almost exactly, same strip mall. This time I was set up behind a dumpster at the edge of the lot with my Canon and the 400mm lens. The Camry came back. I got the plates. I got Ray climbing into the passenger seat. I sat there for 15 minutes watching the two of them just sitting in that car, windows up, couldn't get a clear second face. When Ray got out, he was carrying something he hadn't had going in, a manila envelope, maybe an inch thick. He tucked it under his arm and walked back to his truck. I ran the Camry plates that night. The vehicle was registered to a woman named Patricia Vila, address in the Harlandale area. I didn't know that name. I noted it and moved on. The third Tuesday is when it changed. Ray didn't take his normal route. He went north instead of south. I almost lost him on 281 because I wasn't expecting the direction. He got off near Stone Oak and drove into a neighborhood I didn't know. Big houses, big lots, the kind of street where every lawn is professionally edged and nobody leaves a trash can out a minute longer than necessary. It was around 7:45, full dark by then. The temperature had dropped fast the way it does in San Antonio in late October when a front moves through. There was a thin mist sitting in the halos of the streetlights, not quite rain. I had my window cracked. I could smell wet asphalt and something faintly chemical coming off the lawns. He slowed in front of one house and kept going. He circled the block twice, slow. Then he parked on the street about 4 houses down, killed his lights, and sat there. I pulled in 2 blocks back on the same street, Ridgecrest Trace, according to the sign I logged, and watched him through the long lens. He wasn't on his phone, he wasn't meeting anyone, he was watching a house. Just watching it for 45 minutes. No movement, no cigarette, no music. I could read from his body language. He sat the way people sit when they are thinking hard about something specific, hands in his lap, head slightly forward, the engine running, I assumed, because I never saw exhaust go cold. A dog barked somewhere a few blocks over and then quit. I heard it clearly because everything else was that quiet. Then he drove away. I wrote down the address he'd been watching. When I got home, I ran it. The property was owned by a man named Daniel Ferris. I had no idea who that was. That night I called Donna to give her a verbal update. The number she'd given me rang 4 times and went to a voicemail that said, "You've reached the law offices of Glen Marsh." Not Donna, not a personal cell, a law office. I hung up without leaving a message. I tried again the next morning from a different phone, same recording. I looked up Glen Marsh in San Antonio, real attorney, real office on Broadway, family law and estate planning, same last name as my client. I went back to Donna's retainer agreement and called the cell number she'd listed on the form directly. Different voicemail, her voice this time. I left a message asking her to call me back. She called in 20 minutes, calm as ever, said to keep going, said she'd check in Friday. I asked her who Glen Marsh was. There was a pause, then she said he was her brother-in-law, nothing to worry about. She was lying, I could hear it. I've spent enough time doing this work to know when someone is answering the question they wished you'd asked instead of the one you did. The answer comes too smooth, no hesitation on the detail itself, just that one beat of silence before it where they're selecting which version to hand you. 11 years of this, and it registers in my chest before it registers in my head. I pulled Glen Marsh's bar profile, listed associates, one Ray Marsh, same Ray. Glen was his brother, not his sister-in-law's brother. Donna had the relationship wrong, or she'd invented it. So either she was Ray's wife using her married name, which tracked, or she wasn't Donna Marsh at all. Either way, something was wrong with how she'd framed everything. I went back and ran Patricia Vila more carefully. She had a civil filing from 3 years prior, a restraining order petition, filed against a Daniel Ferris. There was that name again, the house Ray had been watching. I sat with that for a while, a man meeting a woman in a parking lot, cash envelopes changing hands, that same man casing the home of someone she'd once tried to get a restraining order against, my client's number routing to a related attorney's office. A quiet street in Stone Oak where Ray Marsh had sat in the dark for 45 minutes, not moving, watching a house where all the lights were on, where someone inside had no idea they were being studied. I thought about the way he'd circled the block twice before he parked. I thought about the fact that he chose a spot 4 houses down instead of directly in front. That's not random, that's thinking about sight lines. None of it added up to anything clean, but the shape of it felt like something I didn't want to be parked near with a camera. I called a detective I know at San Antonio PD, guy named Torres. I've worked with him on a few cases over the years. I told him I had something I wasn't sure about, and he told me to come in. I brought the full file. The log, the photos, the plate runs, the address on Ridgecrest Trace, and the retainer agreement with Donna's signature and her listed number. Torres went through it without saying much. He spent a long time on the strip mall photos. Then he asked me if the name Ferris meant anything to me. I said no. He said he couldn't share details, but he told me I should close the case and stop driving that route. I asked him how serious. He said stop driving that route. He slid my file back across the table when he said it, didn't elaborate, didn't need to. I called Donna that afternoon, told her I was closing out due to an ethical conflict. I told her I'd refund the unused portion of the retainer minus my hours. She didn't argue, she didn't ask why. She just said okay and thanked me. That was the worst part. Most clients push back. She said okay like she'd expected the call, like she'd already made peace with what it meant. I mailed her a check for $480 to the address on the retainer form. It cleared 4 days later. I never heard from her again. About 7 months later, I got a subpoena, state case. I spent half a day in a conference room at the DA's office going over my logs and photographs with 2 prosecutors. They wouldn't tell me much, but I gathered enough. Patricia Vila had filed and then withdrawn that restraining order under circumstances they were still untangling. Daniel Ferris was connected to something larger that I still don't fully understand. Ray Marsh was described in the documents I was shown as an associate, not a target. I asked one of the prosecutors what Donna's real name was. She looked at me, then looked at her notes, and said she couldn't confirm the identity of the individual who had engaged me. Which means she wasn't Donna Marsh, or if she was, that name wasn't the whole story. The case never went to trial while I was paying attention to it. I have a copy of my log in a lockbox at my house. My attorney told me to keep it. The photos are on an encrypted drive. Ray Marsh's face through the long lens, watching a lit house on a quiet street in Stone Oak, not moving, just watching. I think about that image sometimes, what he was deciding, whether he'd already decided. I read the client harder than the subject now. Someone else was wearing the vest, that's the part I keep coming back to. My name is Daniel, I'm 34. At the time I was doing IT support remotely, which meant I kept odd hours, late nights were normal for me. When my neighbor Roy asked if I'd take some night shifts for the neighborhood watch, I said yes. There'd been 3 mailbox break-ins on our street in 6 weeks. I was tired of feeling useless about it. The subdivision is called Briar Crest. It sits off Route 108 in Howard County, Maryland, about 20 minutes south of Columbia. 240 houses, cul-de-sacs feeding into cul-de-sacs, the kind of place where everyone has a Ring camera and nobody talks to each other. Roy gave me a laminated route card, a yellow safety vest, and a hand-me-down Motorola radio that crackled if you held it wrong. He showed me how to log on the clipboard, plate numbers, descriptions, anything that seemed off. He told me Kevin Marsh would be my partner most nights. Kevin lived 4 streets over on Clearfield Loop. I met him twice. He seemed fine. Kevin didn't show the 3rd week. Roy said he had a family thing and left it at that, so I walked alone. It was late October, cold enough that my breath showed under the streetlights. The leaves were wet from 2 days of rain, and the pavement had that smell it gets after a long soak, something between soil and asphalt. Sound carried further than it should. A dog barked 2 streets over, and it sounded like it was right beside me. That's when I started noticing the house on Dunmore Court. It was a beige colonial on a short dead end off the main loop. 2-car garage, nothing unusual about it at first glance. But the first night I logged it, a black Ford Explorer sat in the driveway. Second night, a silver Camry. Third night, nothing. Fourth night, a white Ram 1500 I didn't recognize. Fifth night, the Explorer was back but parked on the street instead of the driveway. Different cars, same house, every night. The lights inside followed no pattern I could read. Sometimes a room on the second floor was lit at 2 in the morning. Sometimes every window was dark by 9. A few times I noticed a faint blue flicker, television maybe, but it moved in a way that didn't match how a TV moves. More like someone carrying a screen from room to room. I logged it all. I asked Roy about the address casually. He glanced at the route card and said the family traveled a lot for work. He moved on quickly. I filed it away. Then I found the addition. 3 weeks in, I picked up my route card from Roy's mailbox like always. When I got under a streetlight, I noticed a new address handwritten at the bottom in blue pen, 14 Prescott Circle. That street wasn't on the original laminated card, and the handwriting wasn't Roy's. I'd seen his handwriting enough times to know small and precise. This was looser, slanted. The ink looked fresh, smeared slightly at the tail of the last digit, like whoever wrote it had folded the card before it dried. I walked Prescott Circle anyway. It was a longer detour than it looked. The street curved away from the main loop and dead-ended at a chain-link fence bordering a drainage easement, the kind of fence that's been there so long the rust has settled in and nobody bothers to replace it. Number 14 was a ranch-style house, dark, for sale sign in the yard, no cars, no lights. The lockbox on the front door was hanging open, not broken, just open like someone had the code. The front mat was turned sideways like someone had caught it with a foot and not bothered to straighten it. Small thing, I noticed it anyway. I wrote it down and went home. The next morning my clipboard was gone from the kitchen counter. I lived alone, I hadn't moved it. I checked everywhere, under the mail, in the recycling. It wasn't in my car, it was just gone. 3 weeks of logs on that clipboard. I went to Roy's house. He answered the door in slippers and seemed genuinely confused. He said maybe I'd left it at the pickup spot. He looked at me a second too long. I said I hadn't. That same afternoon, Roy called me. He asked which streets I'd walked the previous Thursday. I told him. He asked if I'd gone by the Dunmore Court address. I said yes. He asked if I'd stopped or gone up to the property. I said no. I logged it from the sidewalk like always. He said that was fine, said a couple of residents had raised concerns, said maybe I should skip Dunmore Court for now. I said sure. I didn't skip it. A few days later I ran into a woman named Patricia on the walking path. We'd waved at each other for 2 years without ever actually speaking. She stopped me and asked if the watch program had added a new volunteer. I said I wasn't sure. She described someone in a watch vest, a man, tall, walking slowly along the back fence line of the empty houses on the north side. She said she'd seen him twice. She almost waved, but something stopped her. I asked what stopped her. She thought about it. She said she wasn't sure. She said he didn't move like someone out for a walk. He moved like someone taking inventory. I checked the roster Roy had given me. 4 names, me, Kevin, Roy himself. A woman named Sandra who walked daylight shifts on weekends, no one tall, no one unaccounted for. I drove by 14 Prescott Circle the next day. The lockbox was closed. The for sale sign was gone. That night I went out earlier than my shift. I didn't take the vest. I didn't take the radio. I wore a dark jacket and left from my own driveway like I was just out for a walk. I took the long way around to Dunmore Court and stood at the corner of the dead end behind a row of boxwoods that nobody maintained anymore. The shrubs were overgrown past the property line. The leaves still hanging were brittle and dry, so I had to be careful where I put my feet. The temperature had dropped hard since earlier. I could feel it through the jacket, that specific cold that settles in after midnight when the ground stops holding heat. My hands were in my pockets. I waited about 20 minutes. A white Ram 1500 pulled up to the beige Colonial, same truck from the log. The headlights cut off. Someone got out. He was tall. He had on a yellow vest, our vest, the bright yellow ones Roy handed out. He walked to the side of the house, not the front door. He didn't knock. He stood at the side gate and looked. His head moved slowly, tracking the fence line, the gap between the houses, the angle of the motion sensor light above the garage. He had figured out where the dead zone was, where the sensor wouldn't fire. Then he walked to the next house down and stood the same way. He wasn't checking on anyone. He was measuring, looking at setbacks, fence heights, the distance between houses. I'd done enough walkthroughs to know what someone logging a neighborhood looks like. This wasn't that. This was someone cataloging access points. The street was completely silent. No wind, no dogs, the kind of quiet that makes your ears reach for something to hold on to. Then he turned and looked directly at the corner where I was standing. I didn't move. I don't know if he saw me. He stood still for 3 or 4 seconds. The yellow vest caught the glow from the nearest streetlight and made him look too bright against everything around him. His face was in shadow. He didn't call out. He didn't move toward me. He just held that stillness like he was waiting to see if I'd break first. I didn't. He got back in the truck and drove away. No headlights until he turned onto the main loop. I walked home. I didn't run. I didn't want to run. I wrote down everything I remembered. The plate, partial Maryland tags started with 7EK, the truck, the vest, the time. I didn't put it on the watch clipboard. The next morning, I drove to the Howard County Police non-emergency office and handed it to the officer at the front desk. She took it without much reaction. I filed it as a suspicious person observation and left my number. That night, I sent Roy a text saying I was taking a break from the program. I didn't explain. He replied, "Okay, understood." That was it. 14 days later, Patricia called me. She said 2 men had been arrested trying to enter one of the vacant houses on the north side of Briar Crest. One of them had been found with detailed notes on a dozen properties in the subdivision, which houses were vacant, which had dogs, which had cameras, which didn't. She said one of the detectives asked her if she'd seen anyone in a watch vest. Then she asked if I knew anything about it. I told her I'd filed a report. She went quiet. Then she said the coordinator of another watch program 2 neighborhoods over had also been asked to come in for questioning. I didn't say anything to that. Kevin never came back to the program. Roy stepped down from coordinating about a month later, quietly. No announcement. The HOA newsletter just said the watch program was under review and would resume in the spring. It didn't resume. I never found out who added Prescott Circle to my route card. I never found out where my clipboard went. The police followed up once, a brief call, and said the information had been helpful. They didn't tell me anything else. I still walk my dog at night. I just don't carry a clipboard anymore.